2019 Writer-in-Residence for Forestry England and 2017 Bristol Black and Green Ambassador. She's currently writing for a PhD at the University of Exeter, researching Black British journalism in the post-war period. Zakiya is also a volunteer at the Ujima 98 FM community radio station in Bristol and regularly leads nature-based art and writing workshops, including one on Caribbean storytelling for children. Zakiya, welcome here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. It's been really interesting sitting and listening, and I think there are a lot of parallels that I can draw. So I took some notes of some of the things I'll speak about. Might be relevant to what we just heard about veganism in Japan. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the Black and Green Project. Now I must apologize, when I was in a project, it was called the Green and Black Project, and we've recently changed the name, so you'll see me mix up the names a lot. It's the same project, it hasn't snapped in my head yet. So I was one of the first ambassadors of the Black and Green Project. At the time it was called Green and Black. And there were two of us, and we were tasked with getting Bristol's environmental sector and climate change sector to be a bit more responsive to Black and Asian people in the city. Now, Bristol is this big, greedy city. You know, we're known for kind of city of sanctuary. We take in a lot of refugees. You know, it's that kind of city. And in 2015, Bristol was the green capital of Europe, of the EU, something we won't have again because Brexit, but that's another story. So Bristol was the green capital of the EU in 2015, but the organization I volunteer with, so Ujima Radio, we recognize that while it was a good initiative, it didn't respond to a lot of people in the city. So there were just sections of the city that was just kind of absolutely ignored. And I mean, unless you had a car and could drive to the city center or could get there some other way, you were kind of left out of this conversation for the most part. There were a few events that happened in my community, but those were mostly music events, funny enough, and not the kind of you know, like the justice and the climate change movement events. So the organization I'm with, Ujima Radio, we decided that, look, we have to do something about this. So we started a project called the Green and Black Project, now Black and Green Project. And we were tasked with, as I said, just kind of getting the environmental organizations in the city, which it is known for, to respond to us as Black people, Caribbean, Africans, Asians in the city, a big traveler community as well. So that was on one hand. And on the other hand, we were tasked with getting our communities into the movement. So it was a two-way street. Now, and listening to the talk before, you know, we always know that there's a kind of bureaucracy, there's groups, there's hierarchies that you kind of have to get into. And so we found that this way we thought was a good way, one, in that we're responding to the community, and we're also responding to what the established movement of environmental justice already looks like in the city. And so for us, it was you know, it was a great experience. You know, it set me on the path I am today. Like you heard, I was a writer-in-residence last year, doing a PhD now. I have a couple, you know, publications coming out soon. So I think the project itself has been a success, and it's been refunded again. So we were the pilot, just like the test group, and it's been funded again now for 3 years with 9 people from, you know, the national lottery. So that's really cool for us. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the project, and I'll tell you a bit about what activism is like in the UK and our position in it. And I'll start on letting you know how myself and Jasmine were the two ambassadors. So I'll start by explaining to you how Jasmine and I got into environmentalism, greenness. Now, and I should say that here in the UK, which you guys already know, because we heard it about veganism as well, is that what is seen as kind of like the environmental movement and the climate justice space is seen as a predominantly white space. It isn't seen as a space where you get kind of diverse people. Now, I think that is absolutely, it's, you know, that's how we frame the stories, because if we're talking about people from countries in, you know, where I come from, Jamaica, countries in Africa, countries in Asia, a lot of our Indian friends here, a lot of the things that we do and practice are sustainable. You know, they're things that we recycle a lot, and we don't necessarily think about it as, oh, I am doing something that's good for the climate, or oh, I'm doing something that's good for the environment. We actually just do what we do because, you know, that's how we grew up. Those are the resources that we had around us to use. So that's just how we live, right? And we don't consider it as such. So one of the big things that we have done with our project and what we think of activism in the UK is that a lot of it is about the conversation and not necessarily the reality, right? It's because I might, you know, use a jar 1,000 times instead of throwing it out. And to me, I'm not thinking that's necessarily sustainable or recyclable. I just don't want to go and buy a glass, right? I just don't want to spend money unnecessarily. So I think there are a lot of things like that that we don't necessarily see, you know, we as in minority communities in the UK don't see as kind of environmentally friendly and responding to climate justice, but actually in the way that the UK speaks about their climate justice and their environmental justice, there are things that are already being done that fit into that mold. So I'm going to give you an example of a couple of these things from my own life and from the other first ambassador, whose name is Jasmine Ketiboa-Foley. Yes, I mean, exactly, being resourceful is the best. And we don't see it and say that we're being, you know, climate friendly. It's just kind of how we live. So I am going to, no, I get this question all the time. People ask me all the time, like, how did you get into speaking about the environment and how did you get into it? And I just think, I don't know if I ever got into it or I was just kind of there all the time. And I'm gonna show you why right now. So I grew up in Jamaica. So I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Jamaica. So as you'll hear from my accent, right? I don't sound typically British anymore. Spent most of my life in Jamaica, which is in the Caribbean. So that's where you get your Bob Marleys and your Usain Bolts. But this is typically, let's get you guys out of the way. This is what my life looked like. This is this is what my life looked like growing up. This was my weekends. These were my weekends. You know, I would be going to the river all the time because my grandmother lives in rural Jamaica. So here's my grandmother at 90. That's all my family from all over the world. Here we are again. But because my grandmother lives in the rural part of Jamaica and I would go there very often, this is what happened every week. You know, we would be in country, as we call it in Jamaica, country, and I would just be with all my cousins here, as you see, and actually these two are friends. This is the other thing that happened. A lot of my friends would come to the countryside with me. So we here, us three, this is me, this one, we live in town, so city life. We're the city kids. And my cousins here, as you can see, these are all like country kids, me and my friends here, on our way to the river. So this is in 2018 when I went to the river, when I went for my grandmother's 90th birthday. And again, this is us bringing our children who live abroad into kind of the life that we live. And it's very difficult because here you see the children from Canada are really enjoying it, but the British ones, they hate it. This is my son and my niece. They absolutely hated it. They just could not get with it, right? But for most of us, it's kind of the, you know, it's what we live. Now, I just wondering, does anybody know what chocolate is? Chocolate, anyone? Okay. So chocolate, right? Is how we would say chocolate in the Jamaican patois language. And here is my grandmother, you know, the matriarch of the family, the oldest one, and Shaq, who is no longer the youngest one in the family, but at the time very much was. He is helping my mother make cocoa for chocolate, for drinking chocolate. And again, these are just the type of thing, again, Shaq, as young as he was, 4 years old, would never think that he's doing something that is climate friendly, environmental friendly. It's just the things that we needed to live. Right? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second there. So again, this is kind of how I grew up. And it was a very funny existence too, because as I said, I was a town kid. I grew up in the city and had this real deep connection to the countryside, which, to be honest, it wasn't it wasn't that common among Jamaicans, but I must also say that probably how similar to how life is, how I expect life is in Japan, is because you live in a climate that you do live in. A lot of life happens outdoors anyway, like you do things outdoors or you do things with natural resources just because that's the geography, that's the setting of where we are. And so again, until I came to England, I didn't think anything I was doing was that special. You know, it just wasn't that special to me. It's just the things that we did to live. And I think, so I grew up outside of the UK. Jasmine, who was my co-ambassador, there were two of us. Jasmine did grow up in the UK. And I think it's always interesting to hear her, her kind of how she came into this kind of work, because you know, in the UK, the thing that struck me the most about coming to the UK was that my peers, they just didn't have the kind of experiences that I had. They were very disconnected from the countryside, from the environment. You'd ask someone, you know, where the sausages came from, and they would tell you the supermarket. They would say Tesco's, right? And they couldn't think of a step before then, because here we just end up being just disconnected is how I saw it when I came here. Again, coming from Jamaica, where it was just natural, we didn't even think about it. So I got involved with this project because I thought, look, we have to do something about this. Now, we started the project in 2016, and I'm going to share my screen again, and then just give you a bit about the background. I mean, more about what we did while we were in the project. Okay, so here is Jasmine and I. This is us when we were the two ambassadors of the project. We are at Ujima radio station, where we did produce a monthly radio show. The project was sponsored by the University of Bristol at the Cabot Institute for Science Research or something, Ujima, and the Bristol Green Capital Partnership. Let's get the next slide. Oh, where are we? There we are. There are three. All right. So we did a lot of what happened so far. We got mentoring and training. So at the time, I think I was doing a master's in environmental sciences. So that was helpful for being in the project to begin with. But we also got why is it doing this? But we also got extra training to understand how to work with communities. Now, research in a university is very different to research in the streets. And another thing that was very clear and present to us is that as minority communities often feel that they are researched on. They feel like they're a zoo. There are always people coming in to do research and they never hear the feedback, or, you know, so there was a lot of kind of barriers already. Even with us being a part of the communities that we wanted to research, the moment you come as a researcher, you know, we take on a different role, and it was pretty interesting for us to see how our community responded to us depending on how we approach them. So we quickly learned that we couldn't go in with a very kind of, you know, research, fill in this survey for us. That just wasn't going to work with a group or a community that, one, wasn't interested because they felt they'd been left out, or two, didn't see the links to themselves because of how the situation was already framed as this very kind of middle class white space in the UK. So we got that mentoring and training. We also, you know, we planned all of our projects and what our projects were. Now, initially, like I said, there was just way too much work. You know, there was just way too much work from our point of view to get something like this done. We had too much work. The UK wants something like this. I'm going to show you a video from one of our events that speaks to this. And like I said, you know, the project, we were only funded technically for 6 months, but we haven't stopped working since 2016 because there was just such a need. There was just such a real need for the kind of work that we were doing with the communities. Before I show you that video, I'm gonna show you some of the ideas that we went into in with, because I think one of the, you know, the number one things that we see when we come into this space again is that it is already framed a certain way. Now, right now, my PhD is in memory studies. So I am looking at stories that we don't necessarily think about that may be historically true. Now, I think there's no one that can say that, you know, the kind of sustainable practices that Black and brown and Asian people across the world have kept are not environmentally friendly, but again, we don't call them that. So Jasmine and I had to think about these ideas and why they felt like they were opposing each other. And so we came up with a couple concepts. And I was pretty interested before, in the presentation before, where the problem is that there were no doctors or scientists in Japan that were speaking at that. I think it was a panel you guys went to, and there weren't any doctors or scientists speaking on veganism. Now for us, it's kind of the opposite, where it's all scientists. It's all scientists and the kind of climatologists and the people who have the big words. And we found that we had to, you know, say, hey guys, we need some humanities, we need some art, you know, we need a few other ways to think about the situation if we're going to get other people into it to understand it, right? So Jazz and I came up with a couple concepts that have kind of led our work for a long time in how we think about you know, what we do. So this is how we've, excuse me guys, this is how we kind of came up with, oops, I got my laptop is stuck. Sorry.
No worries, take your time. We've had plenty of technical difficulties so far. So
okay, here we go. All right, I've got you again. Right. So we had to come up with a group of concepts that we wanted to see the world through, a lens that we wanted to see the world through. And this is kind of what we thought about. We did a lot of art projects. And so one of our art projects was looking at the concepts of tradition, you know, the old style of doing things, and movement and engineering and things that change, which we thought was represented in this image here. And again, these are when we speak to big organizations. You know, I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago to a group of scientists. Again, I knew nothing of what they were speaking about, but they were interested in having a human element to what they were doing. And I think that's what's missing a lot. We hear a lot of scientific jargon and we don't recognize or remember that it leads back into the life of people. So we did a few light-hearted ones. I am, you know, I love reggae music. I'm #1 reggae fan. And so we did a few projects like this where we just brought concepts of nature and concepts of things that we grew up on. Again, this idea of nurture, just the things that I grew up with, and how is it that we could bring them into a space where they seemed that they work together. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of how we did that. And this was a pretty interesting project, again, because this was a group of adults and children, and it meant that for the adults felt pretty stupid doing it to begin with. Here's another one. They felt really silly doing it to begin with, but I think after a while we recognized that it was helping us to bring together these ideas of really feeling established and following the rules, and also seeing things a different way. You know, is what we did with the Green and Black project a lot. It was looking at one issue from different angles and saying, look, there are many different ways and many different solutions on how we can solve some of these projects. So some of the groups that we work with as well, you know, we work with a lot of African Caribbean communities. We worked with the Avon and I think it's Avon and Gloucestershire Chinese women's group in Bristol. We worked with South Indian communities, and so a few others. Again, this was only in a 6-month period, so we didn't have like forever. And hopefully the new group that comes in next September, next month, will carry on some of that work for us. I'll just show you a few, you know, another, this is from an artist. Sorry, I'm terrible with this app. This is from an artist again, which we, you know, we thought it was a good way to We don't want that. Okay. Sorry. We thought, bringing art together was a good way to get some of the messages across. And so we actually did do that with quite a few trips. And like I said, we were in the business of talking to the mayor. So there were times when I was sitting with the mayor of Bristol and the assistant mayor of Bristol. But there were also times, and we recognized we were doing a lot of that. We were talking to CEOs, we were being asked to sit on board meetings. And we did a lot of that until we recognized that we needed the other streams. So remember, we have these two streams of towards the establishment and then back into our communities. So we thought, okay, we want to get people interested in climate justice and environmental justice. What's a good way to do that? The first thing we did was say, look, we're just going to have some trips. We're just going to carry people out to kind of experience, explore, and, learn about what's happening around them. So we did quite a few of those trips. And I mean, those were my favorite parts. One, because it was, again, it's just being outdoors. But it also meant that there were a lot of, camaraderie and bonding that happened among the, adults and young people who joined us on our trips. So here's one that we did last year, and we went, from I don't like being outdoors because there's too much mud to please can we walk through the mud, please. And I mean, these were, you see here, this is the most I've ever been outdoors, and I love it. These are young people who have spent a lot of their time in the city. Again, to me, it just seems so strange because I grew up in the city, but every weekend I was in the country. And so we did this for a while. This was a photo project, so we it's funny that we did disposable cameras and we're an environmental group, but again, we had to balance up between having everyone involved and interested and just having them roam around, with nothing to do. So everyone had a camera here, and we did have a couple professional cameras that we had, going around the group. And I mean, this is a group that if I see any of these girls now in the area, they stop me and they'll pull me up and say, have you been anywhere without me? Make sure you don't go anywhere and I'm not on the trip, because I think there were such great experiences for them that it it really sets the tone for I think what they have gone on to do. So that's one set. This is the same trip. Yeah, this is the same trip here, but again, we're looking at just having fun, the things that these children don't do. This is my son here who has just woken up upstairs. I can hear him. Again, had never seen cows before. And to me, it just was absurd. I grew up seeing cows everywhere. I grew up having been late for school because somebody took the cows from the hills and we just had to wait for the cows to cross the street before we could drive, And I mean, I will never forget these moments because, they stood here for so long just watching the cows. And there were some of us who were even further back because they were scared of the cows. But some of these girls actually ended up much closer to them for the first time. And I mean, the way how they look is really how fascinated they were. I think this picture really captures a lot of what happened there. Again, they're just being mesmerized by things outside. And, while this isn't a trip about climate change, it is about environment. And what we do hope happens with these is that spark of environmental justice and wanting is picked up there. And again, I just want to stress this idea that we never speak about climate justice and environmental justice in this country as it being about, trying to get BAME people or Black and brown people, however you want to term it, into a movement that doesn't include them. It's about getting that movement to recognize a lot of what is already happening in communities. So I'm just going to play this short clip. I told you we had a radio show. So this is a clip from our radio show, some of the interviews from our radio show where we're speaking to someone from South Sudan. So Liz is from Kenya, Ade is Nigerian and Jamaica, they are Bangladeshi, and South Sudan, so the newest country in the world, right? And again, these are places in the global South. They're so-called third world developing countries, as opposed to the UK where we live and work, which is developed country. But this is us saying, like, actually, developed countries, first world countries, global north needs to be looking a lot more to the global south. Let's listen to that. Magic City, beautiful Bristol City, the magic city for us.
And if you've just tuned in, this is Green and Black Radio. Welcome. Here we will be questioning diversity in the green sector. That's what we're fighting to do, and that's what you'll be hearing all throughout the show.
I took it for granted growing up, I think. I'm so used to being around animals and trees and greenland that you do take it for granted. It's nice to take a break from the city. I grew up in a place that is surrounded by nature. So Nairobi, which is one of the few cities, I think it might be the only city in the world with a national park in the middle of it. So I miss that kind of closeness to nature.
Ade Oleo, he is a panel member of Bristol Energy Network and also a doctorate researcher at UE in humanities studies.
We had Bristol European Green Capital. That was quite helpful because then I became more exposed to green issues, and also I became more aware that there were people in Bristol who had ideas, and there were people in Bristol who felt there was environmental inequality. There were people from the African and Afro-Caribbean community in Bristol who felt fairly passionate about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Maya Rose often talks about is she calls it nature by stealth. So it's organising something, for example, a half-a-day workshop on filmmaking.
Yeah.
But you meet in Eastville Park, and then you use nature as your forum. But then you're getting people interested in nature through the back door. And I think that across sectors we have to learn.
We have in studio Akuja D. Garang. So Akuja has made a significant contribution to the development of South Sudan, which is the world's newest country and the country of her birth. And she's recently, like we said, been given the MBE.
There's also, and I would say this is more probably the core issue, that was more of a difference about resources. There was a philosophical kind of, differences, but there were also difference in terms of basically people were fighting over the resources.
Hello, my name's Mohammed Sadiq. I'm the chair of Bristol Green.
Okay, so that was just a short clip of the things that we had on our radio show, and I was just showing you there in the background some of the pictures that we had from some of those trips. And I think, again, it's important that we heard from all of those speakers that, it definitely is not, and I can't stress it enough because I think it gets repeated in the UK so much that non-white people are not interested in nature and the environmental movement. It's absolutely not what we found. What we said, it's about resources and exposure. Now, when we spoke to people and we tried to find out, how much time do I have? Yeah, we tried to find out a bit about why people weren't interested. And again, we just said the language just wasn't there and the art just wasn't there. The connections to where they came from, the music, it was just never incorporated. And so we did, we did bring art in. And so on one of those trips, so not this one that we're looking at, but the one we saw before with the young girls, we started doing a lot of nature writing and nature photography trips. And I think these are so cute. We had haikus, right? We wrote haikus on one of our trips. So this young lady, she's 12. She says, looking at the cows, staring at the mounds, wanting to touch the sheep, yet they ran away from the sound of my feet. Now, and I just think this is absolutely awesome. This is the type of thing that we want to see. But unfortunately, a lot of times science does not see this as anything kind of important to the discussion. Crunching beneath my feet, I feel the trees blocking the heat. Zara, 13 there. Rashaya said, the floor was covered with mud, filled with grass. When you stamp, you hear thud, thud. Right? So very kind of, here we got the girls into poetry, but also into kind of thinking about their environment around them. And for me, I think this is, this is why I continue to do this kind of work, because when you get the girls and the young men out doing this type of thing, they carry it home. right? They carry it home, they keep writing, and they keep wanting to go out. And I'm going to show you, I just retweeted these pictures because I was saying, hey, I'm going to be sharing these in the Japan conference. And I just want to show you what two geologists actually, surprisingly, just retweeted tweet. And again, because sometimes I think Jasmine and I, when we do this work, we have what's called imposter syndrome, because we're not scientists and we're not climatologists, and we feel that what we're doing is not, you know, it's the arty-farty side of activism. But actually, when I see like the world's top geologist who was just all over the news because he's giving the science lecture, you know, because he's given a science lecture, and we have Dr. Anjana saying, you know, this is magical to see. And this is in response to some of the photos I just showed you. And she said it's magical to see because we're growing the next, you know, this is the pipeline of geology and nature. This is absolutely what we want to do with the Green and Black, the Black and Green project. Like I said, to me, growing up in Jamaica, it was just clear. It was just what we did. And so to see that doing that same type of thing for young people here is also what our geologists here and now think is a good idea. I think for me, you know, it doesn't matter what the actual environmental movement says anymore, because we see the impacts that it's having on young people and adults as well. I just haven't shared some of the kind of work. You know, there's just quite a lot. I'll probably have to send links in. We just have quite a lot of video and, you know, from workshops and, you know, just a lot of stuff. I'm now gonna play one more clip because I think we have to take some questions shortly. So I'm gonna give you another, if we have some more time, I have some more things I can speak about. I hit most of what I wanted to tell you though. And so I'm gonna play this clip for you. I'm gonna play the clip from iTunes, and I'll just let this video run on mute because it's not necessarily all relevant. But let's listen to Rob and Nim, and they are. This is at the end of a trip, another one of these trips that we did. So let's listen to them.
Is that it's all God's creation?
Ooh.
And when you think about Black,
I think that audio might be too low for you. Let me know if you can hear that. If it's too low, don't worry. I'm gonna play it again. Just put your thumbs up or down if you can't hear.
When you come and see the birds,
Yes.
whether you're religious or you're irreligious, you can't help but be in awe of creation. Whether you think it's God's creation or nature, it doesn't matter. It just takes you beyond that whole cultural thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we're individuals. We all have individual interests, and it's not until we're exposed to something that might point us into a direction. But it's about feeling comfortable, I think, is what they were saying here at WWT. They were saying that they don't see a certain type of diverse person, but maybe that's just lack of media, lack of invitation.
Or lack of awareness. I think amazing people say they don't know about it. Yeah. But when it comes to diversity, I mean, the birds alone told the story. What makes this place amazing is if there was all just one bird, they won't come here. But I mean, that's what makes it really fascinating. And likewise, I think that it's kind of when you get all that human stuff out of the way, it's not about you, it's about the birds, it's about the wetlands, about nature. Do you know what I mean? It's not about you when whether someone's looking at you funny. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that's a leveler.
For some people, it's a hobby. For some people, an interest. For some people, it's a new exposure. And it's just amazing to be outdoors and have birds coming up to you, having the geese walking by your own feet. It's brilliant.
I think that, although I think Shaista might not agree, but I do think that whole thing about having birds from Africa, Asia, wherever, just like Caribbean, just remind you, you know what I mean? This is, it's all the one, but Shaista said, it's all the same land. It's all their land. Is that the Africa, Asian, that's human distinctions. It's just us. So I think nature is a leveler.
So nicely well travelled these days that they will see the same bird maybe more than one place in the world.
Some of these birds I've never seen before in my life. I've seen them up front. You might have seen them on some David Attenborough documentary. But to see them actually up close and personal. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Up close. That's what it's about.
It's a good level of nature. Get rid of that cultural nonsense.
You forget everything.
Actually, that's what it is. You come here and you just forget everything. Yeah.
All right, so that was again just a reflection from one of our trips, and how it is that again we approach nature and our conversations that we have. Now, I think I've lost track of time. Do I need to open for questions now?
That'll be lovely. Yes, I think we're going to overrun slightly and just assume that. I think it's necessary considering how many questions are there already.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it spoke to me on a personal level as well, because I'm originally from Moldova in Eastern Europe, and we were part of the Soviet Union, and because of that, resources were very often sort of scarce. And my grandma, she would never, ever, ever throw a plastic pot. She would keep them for years, store buttons, seeds, anything into them, but she would never think of herself as an environmentalist. So my question to you is actually about language. Do you think it's necessary to adopt the green environmentalist language, or should we sort of widen the definition of what kind of words do we use to describe ourselves? And this is perhaps relevant to the vegan debate as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. In some ways, I think we really resent having to speak in the language of the establishment. But my thing now is that we don't have time to waste. Like, we honestly, the earth, we just don't have time to waste. So I think we have to be doing both. We definitely, we from our communities should be inputting into what the movement says. And I mean, and it's hard because you have to shout and no one listens to you to begin with. But I definitely think we have to be doing that. But also like banging on the doors and saying, you need to be responding to us. Because as you just said, what your grandmother did, she would never think of it as environmental friendly. And we wouldn't either until we had the language, until we had that language to say, oh, I think that's sustainable. I think you're living sustainably there. Until we had that language also, we wouldn't. Most of the things that we did them for economical reasons. And I still think that's important to point out too, because we know that Western society is just built on entirely consumerism, right? So I think it's also important for us to point out that, that's not how we operate or had the language for it, because we didn't have this kind of, excessive consumerism where in Jamaica we call it use and dash, right? As you use it, you can dash it. You can throw it away because no one cares. You can buy a new one tomorrow, peel off the plastic, and never think about where the plastic and the trash goes.
Thank you so much. That's pretty insightful. Ellie, up to you.
Hello. Thank you so much for the lecture. It was both inspiring and wholesome. So I have like a question that's hidden within like lots of points. So I'm also really interested in climate justice and how climate change is racist and sexist and how it just like exacerbates inequalities. And I was just wondering, like, what do you think the government should be doing? Because obviously, like, the UK made a lot of its money through exploiting other countries. So what dialogue should it be having with like the global south? What dialogue should it be having with people who are BME within the UK? Like, what do you think it should be doing to increase inequality and to also increase what it's doing for climate justice? Because at the moment, as far as I know, it's not doing anything.
No, it's not doing much at all. It's absolutely a good question, and I could get in trouble for saying some of this, but I think the movement for reparations in like countries in the Caribbean, I think it's pretty important for a time like this where those countries are, most often the first and the worst to be affected by climate change. Now, it happens here too. We know that poor people, disabled people, uneducated people who are at the bottom of this hierarchy of society that we've built, we know that they are more like, it's this part of this hierarchy. It's the people here that are probably first and worst affected. So, and it's the resources. As you said, exploitation, extraction has left some of these countries in the problem. My father is from Guyana, and that's where I did my master's degree on, because they found a whole bunch of petroleum there. And ExxonMobil, well, because of Corona, it didn't happen, but ExxonMobil is set to extract all of that. It doesn't bode well for them, because in 1996, they had massive waste spillage from a gold mine. And again, it can just be a Western country come in, extract, and leave you with this toxic water because they're not the protections. So I think the resources, one, I think us, you know, in those countries and us here, we have to push for the protections for, you know, country, people, communities. You have to push for the protections because, you know, we've seen it with COVID now. It's people, again, it's these people here in the hierarchy who are unfortunately falling first and worse to COVID. So I think the movement for reparations is important now because of climate change. Now, I know, you know, it's important because it was an atrocity that should be, you know, attended to. But because these countries are being affected by climate change now, I think it is the duty of countries like the UK to step into its Commonwealth places and put the protections in place.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting.
Branavan has his...
First, Kira, she went in the chat, and then Branavan, yes.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. That it really touched me because my grandfather came over to the UK in the 1950s in the Windrush generation from Jamaica, and I remember when I was really young, I wanted to squash a bug on the floor, and I was walking with my dad, and my dad said to me, don't crush the bug, and I was like, why? And he said, what right do you have to do that? Why does it deserve to die? Why is your life more than that ant? And from that moment, you know, like my positionality to nature was set, and I viewed myself a lot closer to nature in that kind of way. And I feel like from my English side of my family, I feel that there's really not that like connectivity with nature in that position. It's a lot to do with like human exceptionalism. And I did my dissertation on it. And my question is that, you know, those stories and that oral history is really important when it comes to Caribbean families.
Yes.
And not just Caribbean families, you know, also Indian families as well, and many other different cultures. And I think that, you know, a statistic can shock you, but oral history and stories are what stay with you, because I remember that to this day, whereas I will forget a statistic. And how do we raise these forms of knowledge sharing as legitimate in a world that values, or in a society that privileges science over personal experience?
I mean, honestly, this is a perpetual problem for me, and I am in a good position because I exist. So like I said, I did the environmental sciences degree, and now I'm back in literature, and I'm lucky because people will call me to science events because I have that background, but I also exist as an artist as well. And I think, you know, I don't know if a lot of the scientists are ever going to accept. I don't know if the people who rely on statistics will ever accept it, you know. But I think that's why I'm loud and I'm kind of annoying sometimes about it, because as you said, it's the stories that we remember. You know, I'm only in this work because I remember all those river trips I took with my young people. And I mean, so I think for some of us, it will be for us, you know, for everyone in this chat, I think it's for us. And unfortunately, we do have to kind of go, just like the question before, we do have to be able to speak in their language, I think. We do have to be able to speak in their language, but it's an asset because let's see it as a good thing, actually, that we have the language of our people and our oral tradition and our understanding of a, you know, a spirit-based world. I don't know, you know, an art-based, however you want to see that, a world with the human at the center, humanism, some people might call it, as opposed to a world with the numbers, the stats at the center. So I think to everyone in this chat, because you're all, you know, university students and stuff, and thank you for raising that, because, you know, I think this is a message I must say, that when I am speaking to people who are university educated, we have to be the ones to say, look, I have the knowledge of colonialism and capitalism. I have that knowledge. I know how to use it as well. But I also have the knowledge of tradition and disrupting capitalism and disrupting and you know, disrupting the kind of narrative that we're given. So I mean, I'll think about that a lot more myself too, but I think, you know, we have to do that. So that's my task to all of us here, is that we're going to be those ones, you know, we're going to be on the podium talking about science and then giving the stories of our grandmothers and our grandfathers and showing that they come together. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Branovan?
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it was great. So from my own personal experiences with climate change, I've spoken to my friends about their impressions of nature, and a lot of them come from the city, and a lot of them, when I point out, oh yeah, the beauties of nature, and point out landscapes and different landmarks like that, they often just call them bushes, and they often just dismiss them as just like trivial stuff. And often I find it hard to convince these people that these things are like resources, and these parts of the natural capital are really important. And as we grow up and as we get older, we're going to be put in jobs where people have high responsibilities. People might be in the future might be managing oil companies, or they might be managing businesses that profit off environmental use of environmental resources. So how should we take action in order to educate those people in those places right now, or those people who will be in those places right now, about the dangers of abusing the environment, and also about environmental protection?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely great. Again, I think this comes down to us being, as you say, we have to be vocal about it. And I have, it's the truth. There's this talk that I've given to you, it's not the same talk I give to scientists, because it's not what they're going to be interested in. It's not what they respond to. They respond to facts, numbers, percentages, and dollar signs, pound signs. And so with them, I always start like that. I kind of always start with the numbers and the dates and the declines in, whichever bird or whichever plant. And usually you have to choose one that's a resource for them. You have to make it personal. So we find something. So I'm trying to think of an example that I had. So at a conference of scientists that I spoke at recently, I think one of the raw material that was spoken about all week was bamboo. So before my presentation at the end of the week, I went and found the stats on bamboo and the decline in, Jamaica, and why it's a decline, social problems, found it in other areas of the world, in Asia, where a lot of them worked. So I went and found those stats to start the discussion, I think. And, like I said, I resent that so much, because why is it that what people say from their heart and what they know, this learned, the learned and experience of knowledge that we have, why is it not recognized? So I do that with resentment, but actually I start there, and I think I kind of gradually get to the point about the heart. And as much as I'm a PhD student, like, guys, I'm so emotional. I'm a poet, so I really kind of get into it. And I think it's really hard, because people don't necessarily believe you. But again, just like I wrote down from before, I think it's very important for us to lead with both sides, to lead with both. And I've been doing this for so long that I think there's some people we're probably never going to hit until it hits them. But for most people, if we can give them both sides, if we can talk from the position of an authority, which I believe everyone in this chat, your authority on your own experience anyway. But the fact that we get in this education, so we will have some position of privilege and authority. I think when we are able to do that, and then we bring in the other, our lived experience, hopefully small, we get 1 and 2 people to come and join us on this side, because unfortunately it really is a divide. And I think those of us who do care about climate change will have to be the kind of hand-holding, on the two sides, because I don't think we have time to waste anymore. So there's no time to guilt anybody. We're not trying to guilt people. We don't want to ridicule the climate deniers. Actually, we want them to learn. We want them to learn and join us in this fight for justice and earth protection. So it's pretty hard, but I think possibly, I haven't thought about it before, but, thanks for your question. And once before, I think my practice has to very much be with you see the shows with the devil and the angel. I think my devil is gonna be my science side and the stats and numbers, the bit I don't understand as much. And on the other side, I'll always have the kind of lived experience and art and humanism of it, because, and the thing that I always say to scientists, which I think hits home, is when I say, look, all of the work you're doing is for a human in the middle, is for humans to have a better life. And I think pulling it back there all the time helps. But we also can't stop people just from wanting to accumulate whole reams of capital. I don't, it's addictive, I suppose. I don't know. I'm broke. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, so much for today. We overrun, and I'm sorry about that, but I think it's just testament of how fascinating both discussions have been, and the engagement has been fantastic. So please join us in unmuting yourself and clapping, because it's.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just gonna put my my contact details in the email, in the chat, because I'm happy to speak with anyone kind of on a different, online or via email. If you want to email me, I'm really happy to kind of chat with anyone. Thank you guys so much. It's been great.
That's absolutely
Thank
great.
you.
Somebody has already asked the Twitter handle for both your organization and Beyond in Tokyo. So hopefully we're getting more conversations going. And also today we have a film screening, which is happening at 11. So very, very soon. There's a couple of people that haven't yet signed up. If you want to join, feel free to invite friends. We still have a bit of room to work with. Yeah, we'll see you very, very soon.